in the heart of Umuochi village, where red earth stained the feet of farmers, and the river sang at dawn, a child was born into a family that had nothing but their names and their sweat. His father, Okon, was a mechanic whose hands were forever blackened with oil and grease. His mother, Ekati, was a food seller who roasted plantains and cooked beans by the roadside, her smoke-stained eyes always looking toward the sky, as though waiting for heaven to notice her suffering. On the night Andrew was born, the moon hid behind dark clouds. The midwife whispered that the labor would be long, and indeed Ekati screamed through the night as thunder cracked above the hut. But just as the cock crowed at dawn, the storm ceased. A single beam of sunlight pierced through the thatch roof, falling directly on the newborn's face. The elders who came to see him murmured that it was a sign. Children touched by such light carried destinies too great for ordinary men. But not everyone rejoiced. Among Okon's brothers and sisters, who had grown fat from wealth in the city, there was no joy. They feared the omen, for a child who carried destiny could outshine their own children. Already they muttered in corners, saying, "We must watch this boy. We must not allow him to climb higher than our sons." Andrew grew in poverty. His first toy was a carved stick, and his first classroom was the veranda of the old village school. His uniform was patched at the elbows, his sandals worn thin. Yet, when he touched books, something in him glowed. Letters danced before his eyes like old friends returning from war. Numbers bowed to him, as though he were their king. Teachers shook their heads in wonder, for the boy answered questions even the older children could not. But with brilliance came envy, even from blood. His cousins mocked him, saying, "Book cannot fill stomach. Let us see if your wisdom will buy food for your mother." Andrew ignored them, but inside he wondered why his relatives never once offered to help with his fees, though they lived in big houses and drove cars that shone under the sun. His parents told him gently, "My son, do not look to them. Look to God. The tree that refuses you shade will one day bow when the storm comes." By the time Andrew was 10, strange things began to happen. Strangers in the marketplace would call him over and press coins into his hand, saying, "Something about your face makes me want to bless you." Hungry, he would run to his mother's shop and drop the coins into her lap, and she would burst into tears. It was as though the universe itself had taken pity on the boy. Yet, in the hidden chambers of their hearts, his relatives tightened their fists. The boy was growing, shining, and every step he took toward greatness felt like a shadow over their own children. Already, a storm of envy was brewing, though Andrew was too young to know it. But what none of them knew was that the same light that fell upon Andrew's face at birth would guide him through darkness, and every hand raised against him would one day wither. Yet before that day, he would walk through fire. Andrew's childhood was painted with hunger, but his spirit was painted with fire. Each morning before school, he would sweep his mother's small shop, carry buckets of water for her cooking, and then run barefoot down the dusty path to class. His classmates often came with tins of milk, loaves of bread, and pockets full of coins. Andrew came with nothing but a slate, a half pencil, and the determination of 10 men. Still, he always topped the class. Teachers would sometimes give him extra bread during break, and one teacher in particular, Mr. Bassi, often told him, "Andrew, you are a candle. The world is dark, but you will light it. Do not let poverty quench your flame." But Andrew knew how hard it was. At break time, when his classmates bought meat pies and cold drinks, his stomach would grumble. He would drink water from the school tap to trick his body into silence. One day, as he sat alone under the mango tree, a boy named David approached him. David was from a rich home, his father a wealthy businessman in the city, his mother a glamorous woman who wore gold bracelets that jingled like tiny bells. David, unlike most of the rich children, had a kind heart. He noticed Andrew's eyes fixed on the snacks others were eating, and without hesitation he stretched out his lunchbox. "Take," he said simply. Andrew hesitated. His pride resisted, but his hunger betrayed him. He accepted. That was the beginning of a friendship no one could ever break. From that day on, David always shared his lunch. Sometimes he would sneak extra coins into Andrew's pocket, whispering, "Don't tell anyone. Just buy what you need." When the school driver came to pick David up, he would often insist they drop Andrew near his mother's shop or father's workshop before heading home. The driver would sigh but obey, and Andrew's parents, with tears in their eyes, blessed David every time they saw him. But news of this friendship reached Andrew's relatives. They sneered, saying, "So he feeds from the hands of strangers now? Let us see where that will lead him." In truth, Andrew's relatives feared this bond. They knew that with support, Andrew's brilliance could become unstoppable. Still, Andrew pressed on. He helped his mother sell food in the evenings, balancing trays of beans and fried plantain on his small head, calling out to passers-by with a smile. Other times, he was at his father's mechanic shop, handing him spanners and learning the names of car parts. It was a hard life, but his parents' love wrapped him like a shield. His mother would often stroke his head at night, whispering prayers. "O Lord, may this boy's light never be dimmed. May helpers rise for him where relatives refuse." And helpers indeed rose, unexpected ones. One evening, as Andrew helped his father fix a customer's car, the man, an elderly trader, watched him keenly. "Your boy is sharp," the trader said to Okan. "He reminds me of myself as a child. Take this," he added, slipping a bundle of Naira notes into Okan's pocket. "Let him not miss school for lack of books." Such blessings kept coming, as if the universe itself conspired to keep Andrew's path alive. Yet, envy thickened in the hearts of his relatives. They mocked his family at gatherings, whispering that Andrew's parents were raising him too high for their status. By the time Andrew finished secondary school, his brilliance was undeniable. He graduated with the highest grades in the entire district. Teachers praised him, strangers celebrated him, but in the dark corners of his relatives' homes, silence hung heavy. Because for them, Andrew's success was not a reason to rejoice. It was a wound, festering with envy. But destiny, my children, is like a stubborn river. It flows where it must. Andrew was about to step into the university, where battles far greater than hunger awaited him, and this time, his enemies would not sit idle. In Umuochi village, envy did not always show its teeth in the open. Sometimes it wore the mask of a smile. Sometimes it hid behind careless laughter at family gatherings. But it was there, sharp, waiting. When Andrew's excellent secondary school results spread across the community, strangers rejoiced. His teachers spoke proudly of him in churches and town meetings. Even the village head praised him as an example for the younger ones. But among his blood relatives, bitterness grew like weeds choking a farm. His father's elder brother, Uncle Effiong, was the loudest. He gathered with his wife and children in the evenings, spitting words like venom. "If this boy goes to university, he will become greater than all our sons. Do you not see? Okan's family will rise, and we will bow. We must not allow it." His wife nodded eagerly, her voice dripping with malice. "Yes, husband. Their poverty is their rightful place. If the boy climbs, our children will forever walk behind him. We cannot let that happen." They began to plot, not in one day, but slowly, like termites eating wood from within. Meanwhile, Andrew, unaware of the hatred brewing, was filled with hope. He had secured admission into the university, but the joy quickly turned into fear. Where would the money come from? His father's workshop barely kept food on the table. His mother's small shop could not even pay for his acceptance fees. But Andrew was not one to give up. He prayed at night, his knees pressed against the mud floor, whispering to God for a miracle. And miracles came in strange ways. A local pastor announced that there was a scholarship opportunity sponsored by a wealthy organization in the city. Andrew applied with trembling hands, not daring to believe he would be chosen. But weeks later, when the results came, his name was there, bold and clear. It was a small scholarship, but enough to cover tuition. The rest he would hustle for. When his relatives heard the news, they clenched their fists. Uncle Effiong spat on the ground, muttering, "So the boy has found wings. We shall see if they do not break." That very night, Andrew had a dream. He saw an old woman, bent and wrinkled, standing at the foot of a river. She pointed at him with a crooked finger and said, "Child of destiny, beware the smiles of blood. They drink from the same pot as you, but wish your calabash broken. Walk carefully, for shadows wait where light shines." Andrew woke in sweat, shaken, but unable to explain the dream. He told his mother, and she frowned deeply. "Your grandmother often spoke in riddles like this before she died," she whispered. "Do not ignore it. Blood can wound deeper than strangers." From then, Andrew began to notice small things. At family gatherings, some cousins would look at him with narrowed eyes. When he spoke, they mocked his words. When he excelled, they laughed behind his back. Still, Andrew pressed on. He took up menial jobs on weekends, washing cars, carrying loads at the market, just to buy books and food. David, his loyal friend, though now preparing to travel abroad for further studies, continued to send him money secretly, always encouraging him to endure. But danger was drawing closer. One evening, on his way back from campus, Andrew was ambushed by two strange men. They demanded his bag, which contained only books. When they opened it and saw nothing valuable, they cursed him and fled. But Andrew felt in his spirit that the attack was no accident. It was a test run, a warning. That night, his father returned from a village meeting with troubling news. "Your uncle Effiong," Okon said in a low voice, "was heard consulting a strange herbalist from the next town. People say he seeks charms to scatter the stars of his enemies. My son, be vigilant." Andrew's heart pounded, but his mother reminded him, "The God who gave you this light will not let darkness put it out." Yet even as she spoke, outside their small hut, shadows gathered. Andrew had stepped into a battlefield he could not see. His books were his sword, his prayers his shield, but his enemies carried poison in their veins. And soon, they would strike in ways he could never imagine. The day Andrew first stepped into the university campus, he felt like a bird that had flown beyond the forest it was born in. The buildings towered like giants, the students moved with pride, and the air smelled of endless possibilities. But possibility did not fill stomachs. His scholarship covered tuition, but not accommodation, textbooks, or feeding. Andrew rented a small space in a crowded hostel, one tiny room shared by 6 students. He slept on a thin mattress laid directly on the floor, his books stacked beside him like treasured gold. Every morning, he attended lectures with fierce determination. Every evening he worked odd jobs. Sometimes he helped in restaurants, washing dishes until his fingers wrinkled. Other times, he carried cement for builders, his back bending under the weight. His classmates, dressed in fine clothes, mocked him. "Andrew, scholar of poverty," one of them sneered. "Maybe one day you'll use those muscles to fix our father's gates." He ignored them, but inside the words stung. Still, there was one thing about Andrew. He was not only intelligent, but also prayerful. He would kneel by his bedside at night, whispering to God, and somehow the next day, help would always come. Sometimes, an unknown lecturer would call him aside, saying, "I see you are brilliant. Take this money, buy books." Other times, a stranger at the market would press a little food into his hand, insisting, "Your face reminds me of my son." It was as if unseen forces were guiding him. But his relatives had not relented. From the village, Uncle Effiong sent word to a herbalist that Andrew must not graduate. He was told to bring Andrew's shirt or personal belongings for rituals. Failing that, the herbalist instructed that accidents must find him on his way home from school. One evening, Andrew was returning from his dishwashing job when a motorcycle sped toward him recklessly. At the last second, he stumbled, falling into a ditch. The bike brushed past, missing him by inches. Shaken, he crawled out, whispering prayers of thanks. Another time, he fell sick suddenly, burning fever, weakness, and nightmares. In his dreams, he saw shadows chasing him, whispering curses. But just when they reached for him, a great light appeared, scattering them like dust. He woke drenched in sweat, the fever gone. Meanwhile, his loyal friend David had left for England to further his studies. Still, he kept in touch, sending Andrew encouragement and small amounts of money. "Endure, my brother," David wrote. "The fire that tests gold only makes it shine brighter." But not all friends were true. Among Andrew's university mates were some who envied his brilliance. When he consistently topped every exam, whispers began. "He must be cheating. How else can a poor boy know so much?" They reported him to lecturers, but every investigation only proved his innocence. Some grew hostile, plotting to disgrace him. One night, while Andrew read in the library, two students confronted him. "Look," one snarled, "stop making the rest of us look like fools." Andrew said nothing, only packed his books and walked away. But his heart knew the truth. Enemies were not only at home, they were everywhere. Still, destiny had its own plan. In his third year, Andrew's scholarship was unexpectedly upgraded. A foreign NGO, impressed by his results, added stipends for accommodation and feeding. For the first time, Andrew breathed with relief, but even that blessing became fuel for envy. His relatives heard the news and seethed. His campus rivals burned with resentment, and in the midst of it all, Andrew had another dream. He saw a wide road leading to a great city. At the gate stood a man dressed in white, holding a key. The man pointed at him and said, "You will travel far beyond the seas, but beware, your enemies will follow you even there." Andrew woke trembling, his heart filled with both fear and hope. He did not yet understand what the dream meant, but soon the meaning would reveal itself. The boy who was mocked as a poor scholar was being prepared for a journey greater than books and degrees. Soon, a door to another land would open. But when doors open, snakes sometimes slip through. By Andrew's final year at the university, life had grown a little lighter. The upgraded scholarship gave him some breathing space, and his grades remained untouchable. He was now a known name among students and lecturers, the boy who rose from nothing. Yet poverty still shadowed his steps. He never forgot the weight of hunger, nor the sight of his mother sweating beside a pot of beans on the roadside. Each weekend he returned home to help, either stirring her smoky pots or handing spanners to his father in the mechanic shop. His parents never let him carry the heaviest loads, but Andrew always insisted, "If I eat from your sweat, I must also labor with my hands." Far away in England, David had settled into his new life. Their friendship remained unbroken by distance. Almost every month, Andrew received a letter or a call. Sometimes a small parcel arrived, shirts, shoes, or even a wristwatch. Andrew wore them with gratitude, not pride, for he knew the hand that gave was sincere. "Andrew," David once said during a late-night call, "I don't care how long it takes. You and I will rise together. One day we will stand side by side, successful men, and laugh at poverty." Andrew's heart burned with hope at those words. But even as he prepared for graduation, shadows thickened around him. His relatives grew more desperate. The herbalist warned Uncle Effiong, "The boy's star has climbed high. If we do not cut it now, no charm will reach him later. Act quickly." One rainy night, as Andrew returned from night classes, he found the road unusually empty. From the corner of his eye, he noticed a dark figure crouched by the roadside. Before he could react, a bottle shattered near his feet, releasing a foul-smelling liquid. The figure hissed and fled into the darkness. Andrew stumbled backward, choking on the stench. By dawn, rumors spread in the hostel. Someone had seen charms and strange markings on that very spot. Andrew shivered. He knew who was behind it. Still, he refused to stop. He pressed forward, and in the end, he graduated with distinction. His parents wept with pride, holding his certificate as though it were gold. The village celebrated him, except his relatives, who wore forced smiles and muttered curses in secret. After graduation, Andrew faced another battle. What next? Jobs were scarce, money tighter than ever. He took to doing small, menial jobs again, painting walls, unloading goods at markets, just to support his parents. And then, like a whisper from heaven, an opportunity came. An international program announced openings for young graduates to study and work abroad. Canada. A land Andrew had only heard of in stories. He applied, heart pounding, unsure if he stood a chance. Weeks passed. Then one morning he received the letter. He had been accepted. Joy exploded in his heart. He ran home to tell his parents. His mother dropped the spoon she was using to stir beans, falling to her knees in tears of thanksgiving. His father lifted him high, grease-stained hands trembling with pride. But not everyone rejoiced. In the shadows of the village, Uncle Efyong's fury boiled. "So the boy will fly beyond our reach?" he growled. "No, his wings must break before he leaves this soil." Andrew had found a door to another world, but behind him, enemies sharpened their knives. The road to Canada would not be smooth. Blood itself would rise to stop him. When the letter of admission and work study arrived, Andrew held it as though it were a sacred scroll. Canada! It was a dream too large for his poor heart to hold. His parents danced, neighbors congratulated him, even strangers smiled at his good fortune. But in the dark corners of his family, whispers grew poisonous. Uncle Efyong called a secret meeting. His words dripped with venom. "If Andrew leaves this land, his star will shine beyond the reach of our children. We must close this door before it opens." His cousins agreed, their envy now a blazing fire. Their first plan was simple: destroy his documents. One night, while Andrew slept, a cousin sneaked into his father's hut, searching for the letter and passport. But Andrew's mother, restless from her dreams, woke suddenly. She caught the shadow fumbling in the dark and shouted. The intruder fled, dropping a small charm wrapped in red cloth. The next morning, the family prayed over the hut, burning the charm in fire. Andrew trembled. His enemies were no longer hiding. Still, he pressed on. But soon, obstacles multiplied. His visa process was delayed. Officials claimed his documents were incomplete. Then, mysteriously, the money his father had saved for the processing vanished. Later, it was discovered that a relative who offered to help had taken it. Andrew almost gave up, but God had another plan. One evening, as he walked home, he met an old man by the roadside. The man was a stranger, with white hair and tired eyes. He called out, "Son, why do you walk as one carrying the world on his back?" Andrew, moved by something he could not explain, shared his struggles. The old man listened quietly, then smiled. "Go back tomorrow. Your papers will move, and take this small token for your journey." He pressed a folded note into Andrew's hand and walked away. By the time Andrew looked up again, the man had vanished. The next day, exactly as the old man said, his documents were cleared. Everything moved smoothly. The folded note he had given Andrew turned out to be just enough to pay the remaining fees. Andrew's mother wept with gratitude. "The angels of God walk among us," she whispered. Finally, the day came. With a small bag and his parents' blessings heavy on his shoulders, Andrew boarded a bus to the airport. But danger had one last card to play. On the way, the bus broke down on a lonely road. As the driver tried to fix it, Andrew noticed two men approaching from the bushes. Their eyes glinted with something dangerous. He felt a chill. Just then, another vehicle stopped by. A tall stranger stepped out, surveying the scene. When the two men saw him, they melted back into the bush, vanishing without a word. The stranger turned to Andrew and simply said, "Hurry. Your destiny is waiting. Do not look back." Andrew never forgot those words. Hours later, he boarded the plane. As it lifted into the skies, leaving behind the red earth of Umochi village, Andrew closed his eyes and whispered, "Father, Mother, our poverty ends here." But deep in the village, Uncle Effiong spat on the ground. He escaped this time, but even in Canada his shadow will not outrun us. The boy had crossed the seas, but envy travels faster than ships and planes. In Canada, new battles awaited him, battles against unseen forces determined to drag him down. Canada was cold, but Andrew's heart burned with fire. The first months were hard, balancing studies with long hours of menial work. He washed dishes in restaurants, mopped floors in offices, and shoveled snow on icy mornings. Yet no matter how tired he was, he never missed classes. His lecturers quickly noticed his brilliance. Within 2 years, Andrew's scholarship was extended. He was offered opportunities for research, and soon, small doors opened into bigger ones. What began with washing plates became internships, then part-time work in respectable firms. By the time he finished his program, companies were lining up to hire him. Andrew began to send money home. His parents, once mocked for their poverty, now stood tall in the village. He built them a new house, furnished it with care, and made sure they lacked nothing. But as his star rose, so did the darkness of envy. Back in Umochi, Uncle Effiong and his allies were restless. Their children had graduated, but none with distinction, and none had traveled abroad. Everywhere they went, people spoke of Andrew. It was like salt on an open wound. So, they took their envy to another level. They visited shrines, offering sacrifices, calling Andrew's name into calabashes filled with blood. They tied knots on ropes, whispering that his path abroad should be knotted and blocked. They even sent word through village gossips. Let him not think distance will save him. The shadow of blood travels far. Strange things began to happen in Andrew's life. One evening, as he was about to sign an important contract for a project, his pen slipped from his hand 3 times. When he finally signed, the ink spilled, smearing the document. The officials laughed it off as an accident, but Andrew felt the invisible tug of unseen forces. Another night, he woke to the sound of whispers in his apartment. He searched everywhere, but the room was empty. Still, he felt cold hands brush his skin. Trembling, he fell on his knees and prayed until dawn. Each time, God delivered him. Contracts that seemed to fail suddenly bounced back. Opportunities that slipped through his fingers returned twice as big, but the attacks were relentless. Back in the village, one of his cousins even traveled to a distant herbalist, said to command spirits that could cross oceans. They sacrificed goats, poured libations, and begged the spirits to bring Andrew down. Yet each time the mischief backfired. One cousin fell sick mysteriously and remained bedridden for months. Another lost his job the very week they completed a ritual. Still, Uncle Effiong refused to stop. Meanwhile, Andrew rose higher. He invested wisely, buying properties in different cities. He started businesses, one after the other, each one thriving. He married a good wife, a woman who loved him not for his wealth, but for his heart. Together, they had children, and his home was filled with joy. His parents, once weary and bent from years of poverty, now lived like royalty. Their laughter returned, their heads lifted high at family meetings. But Uncle Effiong? His envy had turned to obsession. His face grew lined, his nights sleepless. Each time he heard Andrew's name, his teeth clenched. At last, one elder in the village confronted him. "Effiong," the man said, "leave the boy alone. Do you not see? His star is not of man. You fight what heaven has blessed, and heaven will fight you in return." But Effiong spat in reply, "Then let heaven fight. I will not rest until his light goes out." Andrew had built wealth, family, and honor, but envy does not die easily. It gnaws, it festers, and soon the enemies who had failed 1,000 times would face a truth they could never escape. Years passed, and Andrew's success spread like fragrance. His businesses thrived across cities in Canada and Nigeria. His children grew, excelling in school, and his wife stood as his pillar. Everywhere Andrew went, he was respected, admired, and celebrated. But in Umuochi, the storm of envy refused to calm. Uncle Effiong and his circle, tired yet stubborn, made one last attempt. They invited a notorious sorcerer said to wield powers that could choke a man's shadow until his breath ceased. One moonless night, they gathered in secret. They called Andrew's name, tied his image on a clay pot, and buried it under the ground with chants, "Let his light go out. Let his wealth turn to dust. Let his children scatter." But the earth itself rebelled. That very night, thunder roared without rain, shaking the village. Lightning struck the very tree under which they buried the pot. When the villagers came out the next morning, they saw the ground split open. The pot lay shattered, its ashes blown into the wind. Within weeks, calamity visited Effiong's household. His own son, whom he had hoped would surpass Andrew, lost his mind and began wandering the streets. Another relative lost all his investments in a single fire. Slowly, the conspirators realized the truth. They had been fighting not Andrew, but God's will. Meanwhile, Andrew's light grew brighter. He returned home after many years abroad, not as the poor boy they once mocked, but as a man of influence and wisdom. The same relatives who despised him now bowed their heads in shame. His parents, old but strong, stood proud as Andrew built schools, bore the cost of scholarships for poor children, and uplifted families who had once mocked theirs. And in a moment that silenced every tongue, Andrew invited Uncle Effiong himself to the commissioning of a new community hospital he built. Standing before the crowd, Andrew smiled, looked at his uncle, and said, "When you wanted me to fall, God lifted me. When you closed your doors, strangers opened theirs. But still I forgive, for my blessings are not mine alone, they are for this land." The crowd erupted in cheer. Some cried. Effiong bowed his head, trembling, his shame heavy as stone. He finally gave up the battle he could never win. Andrew lived the rest of his days as a beacon, humble, prayerful, and generous. His story spread beyond Umuochi, carried from mouth to mouth, until it became a tale told to children at moonlight, the story of the boy whom envy could not destroy. In life, kindness, no matter how small, can change destinies. Envy is a poison. It destroys only the one who carries it. When your heart is pure and your ways are right, the universe and God Himself will open paths where men shut doors. Support others when you can, because no blessing given in sincerity ever goes unrewarded. And so, Andrew's journey, woven with suffering, suspense, betrayal, and triumph, became more than just his life. It became a living folktale, a reminder that destiny cannot be chained, and that light will always conquer darkness. Like and subscribe to Red Carpet on TV for more life lesson stories.